Welcome back, everyone, to what is our last proper session. We've still got a closing session from myself, but this is our last proper session of CommCon Virtual 2021. Yeah, I'm a bit sad, but at the same time, tomorrow I can have a lie-in. So this session's from Ravi and Vanessa from Daily. Daily's one of our platinum sponsors, and I've said this a couple of times now. It's no mistake why there's a talk from Daily every single day. It's not because they're a platinum sponsor, it's because they really wanted to support the event, and they've got a lot of lessons that they've learned over the past however long, and wanted to share them. So thank you very much to Daily for putting A, the content in, and then B, sponsoring. Notice the order that I thanked them in, because to me the content is the most important thing. Yes, without the sponsorship, we struggle to put anything on in the first place, but content always wins. So talking about sponsors, let's take a look at our sponsors. So we've got platinum sponsors. We've got Subspace, Daily, Element, and Mux. We've got gold sponsors, Taloo, 100 Milliseconds, and Dite. Silver sponsors, Loway, Sangoma, Millercast, WebRTC Ventures, and our community sponsors of Jambones, Telecurve, and Pion. And then all of our AV partners that made the event happen from a logistical kind of perspective. We've got PSP, Millercast, Broadcast VC, Subspace, Element, Mux, and Meet Echo. So thank you to absolutely everyone on that slide. The event couldn't have happened without you. So we're gonna go and roll the video from Ravi and Vanessa, and we'll be back in about 23 minutes, I think. So see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, Dan. Well, welcome to this talk. We're super excited to be here at Virtual CommCon 2021. If your lives have been anything like Vanessa's and mine over the past 20 months, at some point or the other, you've encountered video call issues and you've wondered what is actually happening here.
And so this is the dark arts of how to debug WebRTC calls. So Ravi and I work at Daily. Daily is a WebRTC platform for developers of all levels who are building audio and video apps. Personally, my background is in film and video, and I am now an engineer at Daily.
And I'm an engineer too. Just to lay out the background for this talk a little bit, we're hoping that we can introduce some of these common call issues and complaints that people have, and hopefully try to demystify it a little bit. Hopefully unwrap a couple of layers and understand what is going on underneath. So we're hoping to this serves as an introductory primer to these topics, and also explore some of these tools and aids that are available.
Yeah, so it'll mostly be some basics for those of you who are newer to WebRTC development, but there is something here for everyone, which is my non-subtle plug for just one more thing towards the end of the talk.
Regarding the structure of our talk today, we're going to look at 4 commonly encountered call issues. And really, we're going to use these 4 issues as vehicles to unpack what is going on. We've deteriorated these calls in very controlled ways and recreated these problems. So the first up, we'll look at robotic audio. This is a common complaint or experience people have. I'm going to play a clip. You're going to hear Vanessa talk just now.
Of funding led by Roseanne Wincheck at Renegade Partners. We founded Daily as a bet on the future of video and audio on the internet. For video geeks, going back to the days.
Awesome. So I hope you could hear that, and that was Vanessa's voice sounding very robotic and missing tones there. And I've worked with Vanessa for a year and a half, and she's never sounded like that.
Yeah. I like robots, but I don't want to sound like a robot. That's true, accurate.
The next issue we will look at is accelerated and decelerated samples. And I'm sure you guys have seen this at some point. This is when a video can stop playing at a uniform rate and will suddenly accelerate or decelerate. This can happen to audio as well. You're about to hear a clip from the song It's a Beautiful Life, and hopefully you will be able to catch the beats skipping in this track. So hopefully you heard that. And there's beats that suddenly went missing in between. So that's kind of it. We're going to talk about a few.
There's like one more thing, Ravi. Sorry to interrupt, but like we can't forget about video also. Audio issues are video. Sorry, gotta put that in there. I'm sure most people have experienced this low resolution video. Like you're on a peer-to-peer call with Ravi, and all of a sudden he looks all blurry and aliased, and that's no good. So we'll take a look at that. Some of the things that can cause that, as well as the foil to low resolution video, which is low frame rate video. We'll go over a quick case study of that as well. After we've gone over these cases, we'll reveal the real dark arts part of this talk, which is the debugging tools to suss out what is causing these issues. And so we'll show a little bit more about that. Like I said, from like sort of a beginner point of view, someone who's just familiar with WebRTC, but maybe hasn't worked with it for a very long time.
Totally. And finally, the one thing, we'll get to that.
Yeah, it's so mysterious.
So without further ado, robotic audio.
So sorry to subject you to my robotic audio clip one more time, but if it makes it any better, I will dance the robot while you listen to it this time. So without further ado.
Happy and grateful to announce a new 40 million round of funding led by Roseanne Wincheck at Renegade Partners. We founded Daily as a bet on the future of video and audio on the internet. For video geeks, going back to the days of writing custom encoders to stream real-time video.
So that was gnarly. What was going on there? In the next slide, we'll see some plots of network packet loss, because spoiler alert, that is what's causing what's going on here. We'll see concealment events and concealed samples. So let's take a look at that.
Video and audio communications is emerging across a broad range of applications.
So this is actually the good version of this audio where those things aren't happening. Like packet loss is good, very few concealment events, and no concealed samples, because everything is perfect. The world is rainbows and sunshine, which is great. But we know that that the audio does become bad. So let's take a look at those plots.
Happy and grateful to announce a new 40 million round of funding led by Roseanne Wincheck at Renegade Partners. We founded Daily as a bet on the future of video and audio on the internet.
So you can see here, as we overlay the plot, there's much more packet loss. And as packet loss increases, so do concealment events, and we're starting to see more concealed samples. And I've been saying this word a lot, like, but what is a concealed sample? And that's a great question. This is live video, right? So something has to play out. It's doing it live. And when packets are lost or arrive too late to be played out, your machine has to synthesize something, like make it up on the fly, and it will interpolate audio samples between actual packets that it has received, or use some smart robot logic to predict things or just wing it. And so if you think about it, you sound like a robot in this case because it's actually a machine that is synthesizing some of the audio for you. So kind of makes sense.
It's super interesting that, packet loss can make the audio sound like that. That's really, really cool. We'll now look at accelerated and decelerated samples. This is when video or audio can skip in their frame rates and accelerate or slow down. So in the next slide, we're going to listen to It's a Beautiful Life again. But there's going to be a plot on the side, and you're going to see a plot of inserted samples for deceleration alongside. And hopefully, if you listen carefully, when the beats are skipping, you'll start seeing these spikes in samples being inserted in the audio stream. Don't you ever consider giving up? So again, I hope you could hear that the beats skipping, and we were kind of seeing these spikes in inserted samples for deceleration, just as the audio track was missing these beats. It's interesting to explore, how we recreated this and like what was actually happening underneath. To repro this particular case, what we did for this call was we technically increased the jitter, and we programmatically varied the network latency between 50 and 150 milliseconds. So, and so this varying latency, and anytime basically, the latency was increasing and the audio track would reach a point when it didn't have a sample to play out, it would need to insert these samples to decelerate the flow of the audio stream. So the same thing kind of applies a little bit to video too. And so these kind of network issues can have that effect. I should mention here that, this is not the only mechanism to recreate this issue. Most of these issues can happen in multiple ways. We've sampled a few of these common call issues and recreated them in multiple ways to kind of give a sampling of different kinds of issues.
So now onto the video side of things. In the next slide, you'll see a call that Ravi and I set up where in the beginning of the call, things are hunky-dory and good. And later in the call, you'll see that they're less so. So yeah, on the left, it's your old Stand By the Pac-Man. And yeah, so on the left, it's very crisp and clear. And on the right, we'll see that it's like alias. There's some encoding artifacting going on. It's no bueno. Let's look at why that is happening exactly. So you'll see here that as soon as we, again, spoiler alert, we drop packets. That's what we did. It's a little bit of a one-trick pony from my perspective. But to compensate for less packets, webrtc will lower the resolution of the video sent to sort of be able to still send an entire video with a smaller bandwidth. And that works out fairly well with like the 480 by 720 video. It's a little aliased, but mostly still there. And then as soon as we drop a few more packets and it gets down to say like 320 by 180, that's when we start to also see like encoding artifacts, because so many packets are being dropped, and some of those packets are keyframes that prevent the encoder and decoder from, preventing the decoder from getting all the information that it needs to make a pretty picture for you. And then on the next slide, yeah, you can see that it also affects frames per second, because as I mentioned before, frame resolution and frames per second are coupled because they're both related to video. And you can also see in the bottom right plot that we're dropping more packets, that less packets are received, and resulting in this lower resolution and like degraded video.
Totally. And this was about like 15-20% packet loss?
This is 20% packet loss, I believe. Yeah.
Low frame rate video. So this is another really common complaint, right? Wherein the video can sort of become glitchy and will go frame by frame, and instead of seeing the 30 frames per second camera stream, you sometimes see a slower video stream. So back in September, we received a customer complaint about a screen share having gone wrong, and they complained about the screen share track being blurry. It was slow and laggy. What was interesting was that there was no packet loss this time. So the packet loss was fine. And this was really interesting for us, and we started to debug. And as we kind of explored this call and all the metrics within, we discovered that everything on the receiver's end was totally fine, and we saw no problems on the receiver's client. And when we started looking at the sender's client, we started noticing some interesting behavior, especially with the encoder for the video encoder for the screen track. So in this next slide here, what you're seeing is this customer, they set up the screen share to run at a target of 5 frames per second. So that's the green line that you're seeing, and the blue line is the actual encoder frame rate. And you can see that for the most part, for large chunks of time, it's not hitting the 5 frames per second. There are vast sections where it's doing 0 frames per second and like 1 frame per second. And it's kind of like, it's like the encoder sort of being CPU limited, and like it would encode very few frames for large windows of time, and then almost to compensate on the at the tail end of that, it would like suddenly encode a bunch of like 20-30 frames, and again then drop back down in frame rate. So as we were looking at this, then it totally made sense the way the experience was described. And the CPU related constraints and loads are a significant factor to think about in terms of video call issues. So to put all this together, Vanessa, I'm an app developer. What do you think I should be thinking about?
Yeah, great question, Ravi. You should be thinking about the usual suspects. Whenever you encounter any of these call issues, it's almost always like bandwidth and network issues, jitter, latency, that whole thing, or CPU constraints. And CPU usage is very difficult to suss out from a browser perspective. And so it's no accident that like CPU constraints is the Kaiser Soze out of the usual suspects that are listed here. Like that was not an accident when I made this meme. So yeah, that's what you should be thinking about. And once you have like detected these issues, you can at the very least like pass that information on to the end user so that they can know what is affecting the quality of their audio and video. Or for example, like in Daly's pre-built UI, we make the executive decision that audio is more important than video. And when there's low or constrained bandwidth, we will turn a participant's camera off to make it so that at least the audio makes through. So that's just like one example of like how you can react to these situations and these usual suspects, if you will, once you can detect them. And yeah, so that leads us into like, well, how do I detect them? How can I see these things? Where did you get those beautiful plots, Ravi and Vanessa? I want to know all the things. And the answer is webrtc-internals. For those of you who are uninitiated, you can find them at either Chrome, RTC internals, or Brave, if that's how you swing. And this image right here is an example of what it would look like if you are not on a call currently and haven't been on one recently. So there's nothing there basically to show. But if you are on, let's say like a 2-person peer-to-peer call, you'll see one tab that lists your GUM requests and one tab per RTC peer connection. So in this case, there are 2 people in the call, 1 tab. Let's say a 3rd person joins, you'll see another tab for that person. It's pretty straightforward in that regard. Where interesting is in the reports that you can see they're in, which I think, Ravi, you are better suited to talk about.
Yeah, no, totally. When you look inside Chrome WebRTC internals, there are generally different groupings of reports, and we'll point at few of these reports, but be aware that there are many other reports, and all of them have wonderful information for debugging purposes. First up, there are ICE candidate related reports, typically ICE candidate pairs, local and remote. This will give you information around, the total bytes being sent, transport level stats, if you will. We'll also have some indication around, the specific network type that's being used, the candidate that is used, and everything. So this is a useful place to start looking. Another useful group of reports is the inbound RTP reports. So these are track level stats. So for example, these reports would have stats about all the inbound tracks that I have, video, audio. Likewise, there's an outbound RTP report group of reports. And aside from this, there are other sort of remote inbound reports and track receiver center reports and things like that. But these are generally good places to start.
And this seems like a good place to actually give our offering to the demo gods and do a live showing of what the RTC WebRTC internals are doing right now on this call that we're recording, that you as the viewer are probably watching in a different format, but just trust us that this is real. There's no fix it in post going on right now. Yeah, so I think we ahead of time, identified my stream here, Ravi.
Well, I think the streams have moved around, but we have a bunch of peer connections that are live and open. And how about we open a couple of these guys? This does not seem like a live peer connection. I'm going to try another one.
This is on me. I threw a curveball and joined and then rejoined, which of course creates a new RTC connection. So this is not on Ravi. This is on me.
Let's blame it all on Vanessa.
You should probably blame it on me. I got a robot voice. It's inevitable.
And so this is, for example, this is potentially the inbound video track we're receiving from Vanessa, and you can kind of see the bytes being received, packets being received. You can even look at network jitter on this track, the frame height, frame width. You can also look at keyframes being received. So there's a whole bunch of useful information here. Likewise, you can also find information about the audio track and all of these things. So there's a lot here to explore, and I would encourage people to play around with this in their own free time.
Pretty cool. And about that one more thing.
Finally,
yeah. This is Ravi and I's homage to Steve Jobs and every Apple conference ever, where the coolest thing is set up at last. So you may have been asking yourself as you're watching all these issues, how we recreated this packet loss, or I specified 20% packet loss, or jitter and latency in such a deterministic way? And the answer is synthetic network, which is it's a Docker container that, so let me back up a second and say that call quality is very important to us at Daily, and call quality is also very reliant upon network conditions. So we at Daily paired with a network software engineer, Max Rottenkolber, and came up with this Docker container that allows us to very finely control the different flow into a call or into an entire browser, but specifically a call in this case. So you can tune like packet loss, latency, jitter, and in a second we'll show you how that all works out. It is an open source project, so please check it out on GitHub. This is all accessible to newbies and experienced developers alike. It just requires Docker, make, and a VNC client. And what we did is we took this image and we added in our own custom fake media so that Teal or that Cyan, Pac-Man, and my robotic audio in our Beautiful Life soundtrack. And then we spun that up and opened it in a VNC client and started playing around, which I think there's a screen share of in the next slide. Yeah, so built the container, start running it, and then I use Tiger VNC, just works out for me, navigate to the port, and it pulls up this quality of service page right here, which is houses all the controls for ingress and egress flow. And here, the default flow is all network flow, and we already have like teased out all TCP flow, but you can add in your own specific flow, be it if you want to only target UDP or a specific IP, you can also do that and then adjust bandwidth, packet loss, latency, all the fun things you see here. So in the next screen share, I can show, yeah, what that happens. So in the client, I joined a daily call. Just to be clear, the top one is the robot or me, and the bottom picture is the ingress or the incoming video from another laptop. And here I take all the flow and I just crank up the packet loss to 50% because I'm like a mad woman. And immediately the video like cuts out for a second, reorients, and starts sending a lower resolution video. There's more artifacting going on. It's very clearly degraded. So that's just a very quick, simple example of how we achieved all of these and how we've tested them and can recreate them in a deterministic fashion. It's pretty cool. And if you want, and I understand that that's a very high level overview of things, but if you want to get into like the nitty gritty of how this is working with virtual Ethernet devices and things that are like, I have no business trying to explain, you should check out the blog post that Max and I wrote about it.
This is exciting. It feels like, you can even play God and like control networks and programmatically control networks. It's really interesting. So just to recap, we in this talk today, we kind of looked at 4 call issues: robotic audio, accelerated, decelerated samples, low resolution video, low frame rate video. We looked at these 4 issues. We kind of looked at plots specifically pulled out from Chrome WebRTC internals. And then we looked at how you can dig into WebRTC internals. And hopefully the last part was even more exciting, which is, you can, if you're a video app developer and you want to test your app's behavior in like customized network conditions, you can do that with synthetic networks. So hopefully all of that was interesting. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that, Ravi and Vanessa. one of those topics that I could talk about / rant about / whatever about for hours. Let's bring Ravi and Vanessa on screen now. So thank you very much, both of you. Cool, I can see you both on screen. That's great. So I learned something in that, which was fantastic. I'd never thought about running a Docker container and then causing stuff to happen and then essentially VNCing into it to do stuff, which is really, really quite cool. What's been the most challenging thing for you guys to debug? What kind of scenario has really tested your, oh, we could do this or we could do that, if something pops to mind?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then feel free to.
I'm putting them on the spot.
I need more time to think.
I was going to say I didn't warn them that I was going to do this, so.
No, this is by no means a stack ranked answer of like the highest, the most difficult part of it. But I felt like, while we're debugging calls, it's sort of a little bit of a black box scenario, especially after we've received customer complaints about like what specific environment they were running, what else was going on in their environment, how many other displays they had connected, what are the other applications they're running. Combine that with what dynamic network conditions happened just in that moment when they experienced the call. Add to that, the actual description of the experience is sort of like, well, audio wasn't working, or like I didn't like my audio, and so it's sort of going back from that description to looking at the entire call data, narrowing down and saying it seems like maybe they were talking about these 5 seconds in the call specifically, and then trying to debug, well, was there anything going on the video side, on the network side? Were there other things going on in other people? Like, did other participants in the call simultaneously experience something similar? And so was there something, systematic and central, or like something localized? And then the fact that we don't really have visibility into CPU and what actually was running in their application.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Ravi. It's like what's happening in the real world. That's the hardest part. Like, oh, are you using AirPods? Or are you like, is it Bluetooth? And I kind of wish that we had like a transporter that would just put us in the room with the person who's experiencing issues, because it's probably a lot of times maybe something that would be very obvious if we were sitting right next to the person who is experiencing difficulties.
Yeah. Absolutely. So for me as a kind of outside consultant person that goes in and helps people with this kind of stuff, it's always like that. It's always, oh, we've got these problems and we've got this, and like, oh, we've got a file from a webrtc internals dump, and can you take a look at it? And it's always like, okay, let's take a look at it. Right, I can kind of see what's happening here, but I don't know what's happening in the real world. I don't know what's happened. I don't know this. It would be super cool if, especially the browsers, were able to kind of give you a snapshot in time. But then we get into the whole realm of privacy and fingerprinting and absolutely everything else, and it's so difficult. But it's one of those. This is one of the things that I really hate about WebRTC. I love it. Like I love getting into the detail and trying to, and then when you finally figure out, oh, it was this, that's really, really satisfying. But the journey to get there is like complete and utter hell, or it can be. So
Right.
one tool that you didn't talk about that I find really, really useful is WebRTC dump, WebRTC internals dump importer or something like that. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but again, like if you're not using a CPaaS like Daily that is gathering all these metrics, you can go into WebRTC internals, you can export a dump, and then you can send that dump to someone like me or whoever, and then we can import it into something usable and see, oh, they were using this and they were using that. And so it's a really cool, quick snapshot in time for what was going on when you don't have all of the like stats gathering in place in the right places. It's a fantastic tool. And then another idea that's recently kind of come about because of the new whip stuff that has been talked about is kind of creating an extension, a Chrome extension or whatever, which would automatically kind of create this whip session. And so you could live debug something, like it could automatically open up WebRTC internals. It could it could stream that WebRTC internals session separately. And then you do get this like kind of real time knowledge about what's going on. So that's quite an interesting thing. Like the idea of being able to just press a button, it create a media stream of what's going on, and then you could record it, and then you could gather all your stats all at the same time, and still have a lot of it just gives you another part of the picture, right? And so all of these tools working together is such an interesting part of debugging WebRTC. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, and any CPAS or any engineer that's having to kind of do this day in day out with a lot of different kinds of people's data, because you don't necessarily like have this one-to-one relationship with like 1,000 customers, right? You just get told, oh, can you look into this issue? And you've got no context whatsoever. Whereas at least when I go into a business, I've got some context, and I go, oh, right, I know what's happening, and I know how this kind of stuff works. So I've huge respect to you guys having to kind of pick through that data and figure out what has gone wrong. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I hope everyone learned at least one new thing from that. It was really good. So thank you very much, and thank you to Daily for being a platinum sponsor again. And that's the end of our last proper session. This CommCon Virtual 2021. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. And we'll be back in a minute with another session, which is me finishing up. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Vanessa. And see you all later.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.